This is the node.js tracing workgroup meeting, October 7th, and we're just getting going. So, we have a few new people, it looks like. Perhaps they would like to identify themselves if they want to. Folks who were on last week and identified themselves, I guess we probably don't need to do that again. Anyone?
I guess I can start.
Oh.
Because I think this is the first time I'm in a tracing call. Hey, Ben Noordhuis, I'm on the TSC and I work a lot on Node Core. I suppose most of you know me one way or the other.
Great, thanks for joining, Ben.
My name is Fadi. I'm on the Chrome team. I work closely with the Chrome tracing team.
Okay, thanks for joining, Fadi.
Hello, my name is Thomas Watson. I just submitted a pull request 20 minutes ago to join, and I was invited here. Hope it's okay. And I'm working on the Upbeat node agent, where we do a lot of error tracking and stuff like that. So that's why I'm really interested in this.
Awesome. Thanks.
I think I can introduce myself. I'm Luca. It's my first time that I joined last week. I couldn't. I work in Amsterdam. We run Node in production, and I am actually responsible for keeping Node alive every day. So I'm really into tracing and postmortem.
Awesome. Okay. I think everyone else was on last week. Let me go ahead and I guess do a little recap. There is a Google Doc that's linked to in the issue. Again, it's issue 24 in the Node.js org, the tracing-wg repo, issue 24 for today with links to everything. And there's a link to Google Documents where if folks want to add some minutes, add some agenda items. There's not much on there right now. So we had a call about 2 weeks ago, and so that was kind of a catch-up call, but one thing I guess that did come out of it was to create a set of docs in that repo where we can kind of try to collect some of the information that we've been talking about these many months, so that it's not spread out over issues and other places, so we kind of have a centralized place. I know I kind of did a first pass, extremely rough dump of that, and I think there have been a few updates. I'd like to go back through there and update stuff that I know about. It's kind of the first start of trying to get a little organized and break things down into sort of more consumable pieces. So the last call, a lot of it we spent on talking about V8 tracing, and Ali had suggested having this meeting within 2 weeks to be able to talk a little bit more about that, since the topic is hot. So I think we'll end up doing that. And I got a few questions in there to kind of prep us with. Trevor's on today, Trevor Norris, who is kind of our async wrap, one of our async wrap experts. Wasn't able to make it last week, so perhaps he can give us just a little bit more detail, summary of where we stand with that. Looking at the agenda items, just another, I just mentioned status on docs, which I don't really know what the status is, although I think there have been a few slight edits with it. And then another one to break things down into smaller steps that people with time can do things to move forward. And I guess I was hoping that maybe that, our initial stab at doing some docs would kind of help with that. So, with that said, I sort of see this as maybe two big issues here, chunky, meaty issues of interest to people would be the V8 tracing and async wrap. Trevor, Ali, would you like to start first, either of you?
I can start because it's on the agenda. So on the issue for the last work group meeting, I posted a comment with details on V8 tracing. Some of the questions that Thorsten had asked, and actually at this point, I think it would be really nice if somebody could look at those the documentation, and I mean it would be really good if we can get some specific questions about V8 tracing so that we can address those specifically. I don't know if there's any at this point or not.
Ali, can you perhaps post a link to the documentation in the chat?
Yeah, give me a second. So it's issue number, let me see, 21, and let me find the link to my comment.
Uh, 21 on the tracing WG, tracing WG.
That's right.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'll try to quickly summarize. So and maybe I'll start with the current status. So so Fadi has been working on getting the Chrome tracing changes merged into V8, and there's still some work that needs to be done in order to get those things into a shape that the V8 team is happy with, and Fadi is working on that. But the basic idea is that the trace event mechanism from Chrome is basically a bunch of macros that make it really make a really cheap test to add your traces into code. And on the back end, there's a buffer that basically gathers all the traces into a single stream. And there's also a mechanism that basically enables categories to be enabled or disabled. So this is somewhat analogous to the util debug mechanism, the node_debug mechanism that's used. Like you define a category and then you can selectively enable those traces and those get spat out on the console. So on the Chrome tracing side, basically the basic idea is that a single stream gathers all the types of tracing that's going on, and then it can be consumed in a single uniform manner. And Fadi can correct me if I ever stray from what.
You're on the right track. So yeah. We have a lot of macros. We have more than 100 macros. All of these macros gives you the ability to have scoped trace events and asynchronous trace events, synchronous trace events, flow events that can jump from one process to another or one thread to another. We have also stack samples. So currently the CPU profile from V8 is transformed into Chrome into the stack sample format, and we're working to actually get V8 to spit out the Chrome tracing V8 sample format as well. All of these end up in only 3 or 4 basic methods that an embedder needs to implement. One of them is to check if a category is enabled or not. The second one is to add a trace event. The third one is update a trace event, and these are the 3 that I can remember now. I think the fourth one is to add a new category. So mostly they're very simple methods, and these 4 methods are the ones that would create the buffer or the stream that Ali was speaking about. So once you have these methods, you will immediately start getting hammered on these calls, and the events will come in through the add trace event method that you need to implement. So this is a basic idea. The integration with V8 is that they need to maintain which isolate we're working on, and this is something Chrome never cared about. So for V8, they need to figure out which context or isolate they're running in at any point in time. So we're adding this to the traces. They also have some restrictions around static variables that we kind of used in Chrome tracing that we need to get rid of, among other challenges that we're working around.
Okay, so the oh sorry, there's a lot of echo. Can whoever is echoing mute himself, please? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I believe the basic idea is that node.js adopts this approach as well. That's a question for you, Ali.
So can you repeat the question?
Okay, so okay, you're working on embedding this in Chrome or extending Chrome to and V8 to support this kind of tracing. I believe the idea is that Node adopts this approach as well.
We want to make it possible for Node to adopt this as well. The benefit is going to be that traces from Node. So if you're writing a tool that's going to do performance analysis of Node, it would be really nice if the V8 events, so the compile events are showing up in the same stream as other async events from Node itself. Then you can do correlation and analysis that would otherwise be much more difficult to do. So we certainly we would like to see Node to use this as well.
Okay, yeah.
I'd add something here. So the tracing idea is that you would have a framework in place for all embedders to implement that framework. And in the case of Chrome, we already have it in Chrome, and we're making another copy in V8. For us, we're going to make the embedder, which is Chrome in our case, use the same Chrome buffer to have one stream that collects both from V8 and from Chrome, and put them in one place. But we're implementing it in a clean way so that any embedder can implement their own tracing backend that can collect these traces and use them. So any embedder of V8 should be able to take advantage of the power of tracing.
Yeah. So if Node adopts this, then the existing dev tools or the existing Chrome tracing will work for Node as well as it does for Chrome.
Okay, but what about tooling around this? Okay, so let me rephrase. We implement this in Node.js. We end up with a buffer with a lot of tracing events. What kind of tooling exists around this? What kind of existing tooling?
Okay, as an existing tooling, if you dump this in a specific JSON format that Chrome has, then you can load it in Chrome tracing. If you open Chrome / trace, you will be able to take a new trace, and this is a format. If you dump your trace in that specific format, then you'll be able to open it in Chrome tracing.
Okay, and what about the raw binary format? I'm assuming that it's stored in a binary format.
No, so the buffers will be in binary format, but the trace that you should dump should be in a JSON format. And the JSON format is very well defined. And it maps one-to-one to the traces that you're getting.
Okay, I ask because for this to be broadly useful, it would need to be, well, would need to be useful outside of Chrome. I mean, Chrome shouldn't be a dependency to be actually able to be used to use that tracing data.
Yeah, so we recommend that you use a JSON format so that users can use a Chrome tracing interface to analyze these traces, which is a framework that we actively work on and hack on, and people are welcome to add their features in it. It's actually on GitHub, and And it's not designed only to handle Chrome traces. We actually analyze traces from a ton of different formats, from different sources and formats. So
is the format stable, and is it forward compatible?
the format is very stable for the JSON format, and also you can write your own importer. So if you decide you do not want to use our version of the JSON format, you want to go with whatever format you want, you can write your own importer, and we'll review it and we'll include it in Chrome tracing as well.
Okay, that's.
Hey, Ben, and to be clear here, like this is like a separate app that they created that it's just a web app that you can load. So it's not just in Chrome. And the other thing, I think you can stream this data also. Is that correct? Like you can have partial JSON streaming up?
Not in current Chrome tracing, no.
Okay.
Current Chrome tracing works with a full trace. It does not take partial traces.
I thought it was some sort of line limited JSON or something at some point that allowed me to have even a partial JSON file. It didn't even have to be complete.
It doesn't have to be complete because we close any incomplete parts, but it does not do streaming. Like if you give me another chunk, I'm not going to be able to add it, whatever I just loaded.
Okay.
So I see two main beneficiaries from this. One is definitely the developer while they're developing the app, but also one advantage of these are that they're so low level, there should be little to no performance overhead, I assume. And so I'm sure sorry, go ahead.
Chrome tracing has a minimal overhead because we try to utilize macros as much as possible. The only overhead hit is that if you check for a category and the category is disabled, and then the trace logging itself. So you have to make sure that whatever you write in the add trace method should be also efficient.
Okay. So the second beneficiary I see are the APMs, the companies who want to be able to continuously collect data, basically continuously run this in the macro and stream out the data, and then report that for like a production system. Now that latter, would that be possible?
I would think so. Basically those people would probably want to stream this data to their backend and do whatever processing they want to do with it. I mean, it's a JSON format, so you can do whatever you want with it if you know what it means.
What about the file size? I mean, if you have a busy application and you turn on tracing for a prolonged period of time, will you end up with files that are gigabytes in size?
So in Chrome, we control that by controlling the categories. So if we know that this is a very long-running application, we set it to the minimal set of categories, and we make sure that these categories do not push too much events into the system. If we're only trying to analyze a small portion, then we have all of the categories enabled so we can really figure out what's going on within like this 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So we control the size of the trace by controlling which categories are enabled.
Okay, maybe let me rephrase. So there's a binary format, there's a JSON format. What's the size difference between the two? Because I assume that the binary format is a little more space efficient than the JSON one.
That's true, but tracing supports compression in our backend in Chrome. Also, the Chrome tracing viewer can load compressed traces. So if your trace is just big because it has so many redundant events, it ends up being really small. For example, we look at usually traces are around 200 megabytes in JSON, which usually compressed to around 8 to 16 megabytes compressed.
Okay, oh, that sounds nice. What kind of compression are we talking about? Is it
we use gzip.
Okay. So that so incremental compression is supported then, I presume.
I believe so. I have to check.
Okay.
I guess one of the things I'm kind of figuring out here is that it sounds like Node is going to be responsible for actually owning the storage for these trace events, right? Either we write it to a file, we keep a ring buffer of some particular size, or both, or something like that, right? We're not going to
Is
get
that going to be the case? Like, can we not leave it as a streamable interface that Node or V8 emits, and then folks can decide what they want to do with it after that?
Well, okay, so as far as I understand it, the circular buffer, Holly, please correct me, that simply exists to collect the data, and then there's another thread that does the processing of that data and would actually handle writing that out. Excuse me. Is that correct, Holly?
And the embedder needs to have that separate thread that's going to write it out. So Node will need to implement that thread that basically is going to take a... So basically what you want for trace event is somewhere in memory where you're gathering these events, because you don't want to do an I/O every single time. And occasionally you flush them out to whatever sink you want to send these to, whether it's a file or if it's a network stream. So it makes sense to implement this as a separate thread that's flushing it in the background.
And from that point, we can basically identify how we want it streamed out, right? We're in full control. I mean, we even technically control how it's converted to JSON. If we didn't, for some weird reason, want to follow the JSON spec that they have, we wouldn't have to, right? We're the ones doing the conversion. We're the ones streaming it out. We get to decide that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think I would love to have the option of keeping it in the binary format, because I would imagine I'd run this in production and just leave it on. And if JSON is like 2 orders of magnitude larger than the binary format, I'd love to just keep it in the binary format, and I can always change it later or decompress it later.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like, you can already sense that there's people who would like to collect this data in different formats, and I'm kind of envisioning some new command line arguments for Node that would, beyond any sort of category setting or something like that might happen, would also indicate, for instance, the size of the buffer that we're buffering the stuff to, file sizes for where the stuff gets logged to, the format, that kind of stuff. So it sounds, it's kind of it's going to provide us, Node.js community, a lot more power and functionality than we had before. On the other hand, we have to implement it. Right? That's kind of my takeaway on that. Is that about correct?
Do we think that the collecting reporting thread component of it could just be...
Your audio is really bad, Stephen.
Sorry, what was that?
Maybe can you move close to the mic?
Yeah, so do we think that the collector reporter component of this could just be a userland module, and Node itself just puts in the trace event stuff and just sends it to nowhere for now?
I didn't hear all of the question, but it sounds like it's kind of another. Maybe we can implement it this way. I think there's going to be a lot of options for the implementation choice that we end up, or implementation choices that we go with in Node for this.
His question was whether we could just put in the hooks and allow users to write modules for it. Basically, we don't implement it. Let the users.
Right, and like I said, that's another option for us, right? So I think we'd still need to provide some code in Node.js even to make that kind of stuff happen. But if we did something like that, then the end user or other people wanting to provide introspection on trace stuff would be required to do more work than if we built some stuff into Node.js.
What are we talking about here? Because I think it would be really nice to have something in core where it at least outputs these events in some format that whether it's JSON or whatever it is, and then folks can still build tooling on top of that, right? But I think having it as part of core maintained by TSC and other members would be of tremendous value than perhaps having like a fragmented set of modules that all try to implement the same thing. It would give us more direction.
Yeah, I think what we probably ought to start doing is identifying the use cases. So, like, you have a great use case that not everybody is probably going to want, and that is you want to stream everything. Like in your case, what you might actually be wanting to do is dumping the stuff to the network and then let somebody else collect it, right? That might be an appropriate mechanism for you, or just some other local IPC mechanism.
Yeah, I mean,
but,
I think
but a lot of other people might, a lot of the other use cases might actually work out well if it's just written to a file. So I think if we start identifying the use cases there, then we can kind of think about what kind of stuff that we're going to have to bake into Node to make use of this, and hopefully kind of the structuring then will become a little bit more clear.
Yeah, and so maybe it's worth just capturing, starting initially and just capturing the use cases that folks might want for this facility. But it
Cool.
seems like if Node itself exposed some interface to push data, whether that's to a file or some other sync, and I think that's probably like the lowest common denominator, right?
Yeah, I feel like we're getting a little too much into implementation
Yeah.
details. I mean, we have the V8 module in core, and this seems like a good fit for it. And if we made it a stream and basically said, here's a stream of data, specify the type, specify a file descriptor, and we'll stream the data as that type to that file descriptor, that gives a huge number of possibilities of whether it's a file or a network or whatever, right? Like, leave it open.
That works for me. As long as it's an open interface, then people can do whatever they want.
Yep.
So, looking at the agenda, I actually put a couple questions in right before the meeting. Sorry. Yeah, and they're in the document, the Google Doc, that's pointed to at the issue. The issue points to. I guess one question I had, I kind of brought this up last time, is I kind of get the feeling that maybe the existing CPU profiling APIs that are in v8-profiler.h will maybe go away, because I sort of sensed from the V8 side there was kind of a desire to kind of move the sampling stuff out of V8. Maybe it's not even there. Like, again, I kind of barely know how this stuff works, but instead of having it baked in, like the embedder would provide that capability, and then the embedder would also be consuming the trace events to figure out, like in the particular case with the CPU profiler, what function you were actually in based on compilation events. So is that actually going to be part of it as well? Or are we going to have to implement our own sampling thread? And I assume even if we did, we could just reuse what's already being used.
The V8 team wants to get off old threading from inside of V8, so the embedders are the ones responsible for all of the threads. I think currently they're 100% thread free, except for the sampling profiler or the CPU profiler. It's their target to move it out to the embedders and give them a proper interface to collect the samples, but it's not an immediate goal for them. They mainly want to do it only to get rid of the last bit of thread management they have still inside of V8. So it's on their agenda, but it's not on the short-term plans.
Okay, great. Because the reason I bring that up is that there are a number of people who make use of that CPU profiling API, including the company I work for. So I'm very sensitive to any kind of potential deprecation or it just going away. Sounds like it's not something we have to worry about happening next week. So that's good. and I even sensed from the other discussions that it would just kind of be a matter of moving stuff from where it's already in V8, or maybe there's versions of some of this stuff in Chrome, and we would just then own that as part of our embedding of V8.
Or pieces. I mean, the thread management part. But V8 has a deprecation policy where they go through a proper formal procedure before deprecating things. So yeah, so it couldn't happen next week. But yeah, no, I'm not on the V8 team, so ultimately V8 team owns this. I can't really speak on behalf of when or how they would deprecate it, but I don't expect it to go away, and you won't be the only person shouting if this goes away. I would be shouting as well.
Okay, good.
For what it's worth, we at StrongLoop have our own CPU profiler. It hasn't been released yet for non-technical reasons, but if the V8 profiler ever goes away, I think we would be willing to donate it. So there's that.
I'm going to hold you to that. So good to know. Thanks, Ben. So I think, in my mind, we have a little bit more to go on here. I think coming up with use cases. I think identifying, it was sort of brought up the 3 to 4 methods that we would need to implement. Taking a look at the macros and figuring out how we would implement them. Those are all kind of maybe separate pieces of work, and we can have some bodies start taking a look at those items. Maybe we should just open up issues for those, and so people can kind of claim them, or as they discover stuff, drop some information in them. But I think I'm kind of tapped out in terms of questions for V8 tracing myself.
I had just had one last question around tracing, which is, so this is really great, right? Like being able to get all of these events whenever you want there'll be like environment command line args to Node. But is there any appetite for a more on-demand tracing option, which is to say, like, maybe I don't want to collect all the data and all the metrics all the time, but if I've got a node process that's misbehaving, then I want to dynamically enable some of these probes, these tracing features.
So I thought it was understood that at least for APMs there would need to be some kind of programmatic API where you can turn it on and turn it off at runtime.
Yeah, that would be great. I probably missed that then. As long as that's captured, that's good.
So currently, the API tries to cache the categories that are enabled as much as possible during the trace, so that it reduces the overhead. And part of this caching actually happens in the macros themselves. So we do not directly support changing the categories during runtime, but you can easily stop the trace and start a new one with a new set of categories with minimal overhead. And we're working on like trace discard so that we can close the previous trace as fast as possible and then start a new one.
Okay, and all of this without having to restart the process.
No, you don't have to restart the process,
Okay.
but you need to restart the trace.
Yep. Okay, great.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so that's going to be some additional API that I guess we would need to surface in Node, and then presumably there'd be some mechanism, some kind of standardish mechanism for us to actually implement that to actually change the tracing that's happening. I don't have that in my mind yet, but that's good to hear. So because I think there were, I guess I also had some fears with the macros that things would be a little bit more static than what Ali just suggested. So that sounds good. Anybody else have any V8 tracing stuff before we move on?
Maybe one question. if we adopt this approach in node.js, what would be good trace points in Node core itself? Open question. Anyone can chime in.
Well, we've talked a bunch in this work group about async wrap, and I kind of see async wrap as a great place to put some of these tracing macros to be able to, because that's obviously a very important part of the node runtime. So I kind of have been thinking in my mind that async wrap will end up being a place that we will end up sprinkling a lot of tracing. So that's probably another kind of a use casey thing that we can start noodling on, is to think about, well, what kind of events would we want to put in there, and what kind of data goes with those events and stuff like that. But fair question on everything else, like does FS deserve its own special events and stuff like that?
No, I mean, I can think of a dozen spots to put tracing events off the top of my head. You could probably open an issue for that.
Let's do that too. We'll just we should we'll kind of label that as a different sort of category of use case, where we talk about use cases for consuming tracing, but also kind of use cases where we're going to put our tracing. So I'll plan on creating an issue for that. We can just kind of start dumping stuff in there, and if a couple meaty things, or that just becomes an interesting topic for itself, we can create a new like docs subdirectory for it. All right. So the other kind of big topic is async wrap, and there actually has been quite a bit of discussion, questions from folks, a lot of answers from Trevor. I don't know whether or not stuff has been sort of collected into that docs or not for that. But this is Trevor wasn't able to make it 2 weeks ago. He's here now, so I figured give him the soapbox if he wants to talk about that at all.
Okay. Well, I guess async wrap is not meant to be the end all be all. It was just meant to help us find I/O related things. Unfortunately, there are some cases like timers specifically, and also Nextech, where even though it's an asynchronous event, we still don't get alerted via async wrap because.
Hey Trevor, would you mind giving a quick overview on async wrap first?
Oh, sure.
Really helpful to set some context.
Okay, sorry. All right, so in Node, we have a bunch of, like, if you look in the source directory, there's a bunch of underscore wrap files, and all of those essentially just wrap libev functionality that allow us to do some type of I/O. And I rewrote them so they all converge on this, they all eventually inherit from this async wrap class, so that it would be easy to just touch one point and know stuff about all the I/O, like all classes that can possibly do I/O. You will be alerted from through this class. That's fundamentally it. Each one has its own provider, or there are a bunch of different provider types, so you can see, like, is this TCP, is this a pipe, is this a file system? And then, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
All right, cool. So, yeah, like I was saying, it wasn't meant to be end all be all, just a helper to help us find I/O related things. It doesn't help us in timers and Nextech, but that's something else. Also, it was one thing that trace event doesn't do is anything synchronous, right? As far as I understand, everything trace event is all asynchronous. It has to be processed off the main thread and all that. But there are cases where users want to be able to process things synchronously, or they just want to be able to dynamically change things. Like, for example, one reason why I put in the init before and after callbacks are that users can just write JavaScript and modify the objects as they're being passed through on the fly, and then they can change how that's done while the code is still running. But all that happens as the code is running. Another thing is it propagates. The specific thing it propagates is what I call the parent. So say you have a server and then a connection comes in, it will let you know the parent, or in that case the server, or the incoming connection, so that you can correlate the two and keep statistics on that type of information. I've been playing with some other ideas. I like global unique IDs to each one, so you can track them easier from JavaScript and stuff like that. But anyway, it's all implementation details.
So I guess one thing is that this async wrap, although it's in Node today, it's not API, correct?
Well, okay, so unfortunately, because I suck at naming or whatever, like there's the async wrap class, and then baked in are some API callbacks that allow you to know when an async wrap class is being instantiated, and then just before its completion callback is called, and just after its completion callback is called.
Okay. And I guess the other thing is this seems like I don't know if it's really driven by APM interest, but it certainly seems like it's one of the things APM folks are interested in, right? As an example, I think trying to be able to follow async hops as kind of an example. So
yeah, I mean, it way back when, it originally started out with Forest wanting to integrate continuation local storage, and then over many, many months, many iterations, I eventually came to this, where it was the most minimal implementation, and I also did it this way because I felt it was advantageous for us, consolidating all those I/O operations through a funnel so that we know the path that each one will take.
Right. Yeah. In that case, that actually kind of went off in my head when you mentioned that the continuation local storage, following that thread back from even like 2 years ago, and then kind of landing in async wrap as the current story, as I think is the way that that story goes. So what do you, again, sort of, I guess my thinking here is that if nothing else, there's kind of a relationship between the tracing events and async wrap, and that the async wrap area seems like a likely place that either we want to have some trace events sprinkled in that, or maybe easily allow people to kind of fit in trace events somehow into that. Does that seem about right?
Yeah, I mean, async wrap would make it much easier to place trace events instead of going out to the endpoints and saying we're going to put a trace event here and here and here and here. Just bring them all to a single inherited class. And since the provider type is passed through, you can still be alerted as to what it is that's being created.
Right, so maybe those provider types even end up mapping into the V8 trace category story somehow. I mean, it sort of seems like that's the way it might work, but yeah, it seems to me like there's a lot of tying in between those things, but mainly as async wrap as being a place where, or a good example of us like adding new trace events into node.js.
I mean, there aren't that many that you can add there. Basically, you can do creation, on completion callback, and when it's destroyed. Those are the 4 basic spots that you could put one. It doesn't do much outside of that.
So maybe as kind of another area of exploration would be how we could make use of the existing async wrap facilities and how we would fit in tracing into those. Maybe that drives more requirements for async wrap. That we need to provide more details when we're creating those providers, or when making calls, or queuing events, or events are fired, whatever, right? So that seems like just another kind of more concrete use case for somebody to kind of drill in and look into. Did anybody else have any questions of async wrap since we have Trevor on today?
Maybe a bit of detail on.
Having trouble hearing you again, Stephen.
Maybe a little bit of detail on what async wrap doesn't.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all. I can tell you're talking, but I really can't make anything out.
Do you have a MacBook, Stephen? Because I have the same problem when I use the built-in microphone. If you have a headset nearby.
Can you hear me better now?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
this is much better.
I have like a docked MacBook next to the camera.
And now it's terrible again.
So I wanted to know about what aspects of async wrap are not really finished or.
Stephen, can I suggest that you type your question into the chat?
Sure.
I understood, sure. So, and that's something.
Okay. All right. What we need more work? Well, my original idea of async wrap was for I/O related things. People also want to use it for like long stack traces. And unfortunately, since nothing's propagated with timers or nexttick, you'll lose it in that case. So you won't get infinitely long stack traces. So yes, that is one area that could be improved. I've been thinking about how to improve it, and I haven't figured out a good way to do that that wouldn't introduce performance overhead and probably wouldn't even propagate all the information that's needed. So still thinking on that one. As for nexttick, that is very, very sensitive because of how high performance it is. And one further problem is that V8 gives us no ability to tap into the micro task queue or the micro task scheduler. And so if you use a promise, you lose your long stack trace. And there is nothing that can be done about that today. I mean, okay, potentially we could overwrite the global promise function with our own promise function that wraps or some crazy stuff like that. But that one's pretty much off the table. And, for us to do anything there, we need V8 to implement an API. And I think as far as I landed a patch last week, and I'm just finishing up a couple things this week. Or I'm just finishing up a couple things on my last patch, and after these go in, I feel like async wrap will largely be functioning the way that I had intended the basic functionality to work. From here, I feel like it really is. It needs feedback to improve. Okay, yeah.
I think the loss of context, of handle context, is the biggest problem in async wrap right now. Like the parent object that you introduce in the new patch sort of solves that, but there's still issues, like with the HTTP server.
Yep. Okay, let me address that one right after I address Stephen's second question. Can we coordinate with V8 on that somehow? I would post an issue on their bug tracker, but I doubt that would go anywhere. So
if you have an idea on what API you want, you could just try submitting that as a change list.
I'm just brainstorming here, but what if V8 had APIs to get a callback whenever a call is made into the VM and out of the VM? Would that be enough to track context across callbacks?
What we need is the ability to call the callback just before a microtask callback is called and after. Because users will need to set up and tear down their context in between that call. Like for basically like the promise reject.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're specifically talking about microtask now, I think. That was a question, Trevor.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's
okay, yeah, okay, cool. Right, yeah, so yeah, I was thinking a little more generally. Yeah, like I said, I was only brainstorming, so let's shelve this for now. But Ali, Trevor, maybe you and I can come up with a good API and bring it up with the V8 people.
That would be great.
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool.
All right. Any more async wrap before we move on? I think we're almost done here, at least with what I know of.
Sorry, there was that question about was that a question about propagating the context, or was that a statement?
I think it's more a statement, unless I'm wrong. But like you mentioned that you lose context with set timeout and next tick. This is not that big of a problem because those you can just monkey patch. And then there's promises, which is a really big problem. But then we also have some things in nodes internals like the HTTP server, where we also lose context. And that would be nice if we could do something there.
Okay, yeah. If you could file an issue outlining those specific use cases, so that like basically something I can write a test against. If I can write a test against it, then I can fix it.
I will do that then.
Thank you.
Okay. So the only other things I had on the agenda, status of the docs, which I don't really have any, and I haven't really looked at them. Probably need to look at the commits to see if folks have made any changes. And then, again, break things down into smaller steps. And so I think I have some ideas now that maybe I can start to create a couple issues that are a little bit more focused and maybe do something with the docs to kind of leave some questions in there so people have something a little bit more concrete to focus on. And that's all I really had for today. The last thing we probably want to do, if nobody has anything else, is to think about when we want to do the next call. So was there anything else? We have, in theory, 1 minute left.
Do we have action items?
We do not really have any action items at this point. So that's going to be kind of my goal. I'll try to pull a couple things out here, create issues for them. Maybe they'll be too vague, and we can create new issues based on those or something like that. But I'll try to make that my goal to work on probably this week and next week to try to do that. I'm not going to assign anybody work, but hopefully some of these will be kind of specific enough, like Yunon with his desire to always be tracing. And let's get that nailed down as a use case and how he imagines that might actually work, that kind of thing. So hopefully people will kind of gravitate to one or more of these.
Sounds good.
Okay, so next meeting. So we had a meeting 2 weeks ago. My original thinking was like a month was probably going to be pretty good. I actually liked having this one. I'm glad Ali suggested having it 2 weeks later. So to bring up the V8 tracing, have it gel. It's gelling more in my head. How this stuff kind of fits together. So I think having these two has been great. 2 weeks is tough for me, though, every 2 weeks, just in terms of the time and trying to get these freaking hangouts scheduled and stuff. And I suspect that's probably too much for everybody else. The cadence I was thinking is more like every month, unless there's some kind of hot button thing. But if somebody wants to do something, in 2 weeks, I'd be open, maybe be willing to do to do that. 1 more time. So, folks thinking 1 month or 2 weeks.
Speaking for myself, either works for me, but once every 2 weeks would, I think, only be good if you actually have action items, have things to discuss. And if not, then once a month should be fine.
Yeah, that was kind of my original thinking as well, is that once a month, unless there's kind of meaty items, and I hadn't really thought about what that might mean at the time, but now that we're talking about creating some issues and trying to get people to drill down into them a little bit, those are the kind of things I was thinking. Even still, I think at the point we're at, it seems unlikely that we'd have anything come up on those issues within 2 weeks. If that's assuming I even get issues created in 2 weeks. So. Month sound good to everybody? So that will be in November, 1st to middle part of November. Sound generally okay? That'll be before U.S. holidays. The U.S. holiday season begins and businesses generally shut down here. So that probably works and would probably be our last meeting for the year. Any nays? Yay, no nays. So I'll shoot for that. I'll create a doodle. I'll create a new issue for the next meeting, create a doodle, and people can start looking at their calendars. So thanks, everybody, for making the call today. I think we had more people than we did last time, which is fantastic. And I think we got some good information out of today's call. I'll be going through the meeting and creating some minutes and then posting those to the repo. I think there's like a WG meetings directory with meeting minutes in it. So I'll go ahead and plan on doing that over the next couple days. Go ahead and, if you want to jot anything down in the Google Doc, nobody did any minutes this week like last week, that's fine. But if there's anything you want to put in there that I make sure I don't forget, please feel free to do so, or contact me offline, whatever. So I'll see you all in about a month. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for doing all the organizational work.
No problem.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.